The sun was blazing overhead when Lara noticed the car slowing down. The warm wind blew on her face through the open window, and she was still talking about how absurd the travel plan was. Eduardo, behind the wheel, exchanged a quick glance with Tatiana and smiled. That smile she already knew, the one that preceded something cruel. A minute later, the car stopped. "Get down, Lara. Let's see if you learn what it means to have respect." Eduardo's words came out cold, calculated, like someone delivering a sentence. Tatiana feigned distraction, looking at her cell phone, but her eyes lit up when she saw the girl hesitate. Lara laughed, thinking it was a joke, until she saw the car pull away in a cloud of dust. The laughter died in her throat. Only the distant sound of the engine disappearing down the road remained. The dust began to settle, and the silence became deafening. Lara looked around. Dry fields, no houses in sight, and a road that disappeared into the horizon. Her heart was pounding, but her mind, cold as a blade, began to work. She counted steps, estimated the direction of the sun, and mentally mapped out an escape route. Fear was turning into logic. She walked for hours under the scorching sun. Every step hurt, every shadow felt like shelter, but the thought kept coming back. They want to see me break. I won't give them that pleasure. When he found a rusty sign marking the name of a village 5 miles away, he felt the first glimmer of victory. He knew that survival would be only the first part of the lesson. At dusk, a truck driver stopped. The man, surprised to see a teenage girl alone, offered her water and a ride. Lara accepted, but didn't tell the truth. She said she'd gotten lost from a school group. As the truck rumbled down the road, she watched the sunset reflection on the bodywork and swore to herself, "One day, they will look at me and understand what they did." Hours later, she arrived in a small town and was dropped off in front of a police station. She gave her full name and the basics without mentioning the humiliation. The officers called her parents, who came to pick her up the next day. During the silent ride back, Eduardo kept his face serene, as if nothing had happened. Tatiana feigned concern. Lara simply watched, silently, the monsters who shared her blood. When they arrived home, her parents hugged her in relief, but the story quickly became distorted. Eduardo said she ran away after an argument. Tatiana cried falsely, saying they tried to help her. Lara realized the manipulation was closing in on her and decided she wouldn't say anything. Sometimes silence is the best breeding ground for a counterattack. That night, lying in bed, she stared at the ceiling and relived every detail of the abandonment. The noise of the car, the smell of the warm earth, the distant sound of the wind. Each memory was a piece of a puzzle she vowed to put together. Her heart burned with rage, but her mind was already beginning to organize itself into plans, schemes, and possible retaliations.
He picked up the notebook he used for chess notes and began to write. At the top of the page was a sentence. "Eduardo thinks he taught me a lesson. Little does he know he started a game." The firm letters, drawn calmly, sealed the first movement. Outside, the house slept in silence. Inside, a 15-year-old girl was beginning to become something no one could have imagined, a strategist. If you think what happened to Lara is cruel enough, wait till you find out what she does next. Sign up now and ring the bell, because the real lesson hasn't even begun yet. The following weeks were a parade of hypocrisy. Eduardo feigned affection, Tatiana flashed practice smiles, and their parents tried to forget the incident. Lara observed everything with meticulous attention, recording expressions, speech patterns, and lapses of nervousness. Her mind worked like a war board, and their every move was a piece to be studied. At school, no one knew what had happened. She looked the same, but something in her eyes had changed. They were cold, almost clinical. She spent hours solving logic problems, testing strategies, creating passwords. While other teenagers dreamed of parties, Lara dreamed of access, of truth, of power, of exposure. One random night, locked in her room, she stumbled upon an online forum for a community of young people studying digital security. Among the anonymous names, one caught her eye. Marcos_0xpongxube. He was resourceful, sarcastic, and seemed to see the world the same way she did, as a system riddled with flaws. Within days, they began communicating in encrypted chats. Marcos taught Lara about protocols, networks, and the concept of social engineering, using psychology to hack people, not just machines. It fascinated her. She realized how much Eduardo had always underestimated her intelligence, and now each lesson was a new weapon. In return, she helped him solve complex puzzles and games. The bond was immediate, but purely intellectual. One night, Marcos asked, "Why do you want to learn all this so quickly?" Lara replied, after several long seconds, "Because sometimes justice needs those who know how to play the game better." On the other side of the screen, he didn't respond. He just typed, "So let's play." With the first tools installed, Lara began testing hacks on old emails. He discovered how to access forgotten accounts and crack simple passwords. When he realized Eduardo's email had vulnerabilities, he smiled for the first time since abandoning it. Revenge was no longer a concept, but a project. In the following days, Lara's routine changed. During the day, she studied and feigned normalcy. At night, she turned her bedroom into a makeshift command center. Every noise in the house was a reminder that she was in enemy territory. She became a shadow within her own home, invisible, patient, relentless.
One afternoon, she heard Eduardo yelling at Tatiana downstairs. The argument was about money. Her voice trembled. "If this gets out, we're dead." Lara mentally recorded every word. It confirmed what she already suspected. There were secrets behind her brother's success. When he went to bed that night, he opened the notebook again and wrote, "Phase 2, understand the enemy." The clock read 2:47 a.m. The game was just beginning. The following days became a carefully choreographed performance. Eduardo insisted on appearing as the protective brother, kissing Lara's forehead in front of her parents, while Tatiana exchanged glances, betrayed the game of appearances. She smiled, feigning innocence, but deep down, every gesture fueled her determination. The family drama continued, and the audience, her parents, applauded, oblivious to the unfolding tragedy. During breakfast, she listened to Eduardo tell stories of how he saved his sister after a teenage crisis. Her parents listened attentively, moved, while Lara simply stirred her coffee, hiding her nausea. "Thank your brother, Lara," her mother said. She looked up and replied calmly, "I always give thanks for what they deserve." Eduardo laughed, not understanding the subtlety. Her parents' blind trust was the perfect cover. No one would suspect the quiet girl who spent hours studying. But what she studied weren't school books. They were email routines, her brother's work schedules, her company's cash flow. Everything recorded, analyzed, and cataloged with mathematical precision. One rainy afternoon, while his parents were sleeping, Lara hacked into Eduardo's personal computer. Using a combination of social engineering and simple scripts, he accessed his inbox and began copying files. The words deposit, cold note, and hidden partnership recurred in the messages. The pieces were starting to fit together. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and imagined her brother laughing as he left her alone on that road. The memory was fuel. She copied each document to an encrypted flash drive and hid it in a book with a false cover, The Art of War. It seemed too symbolic to be a coincidence. Tatiana, increasingly present, began to notice Lara's analytical gaze. One day, upon encountering her in the living room, she commented sarcastically, "You've been looking at your brother's computer too much." Lara replied without hesitation, "And you look at his bank account too much." The woman smiled, disconcerted. It was the first time she'd seen something dangerous in the girl's eyes. At night, Lara sent a message to Marcos. "I found the weak point. The transactions are in the name of frontmen." The answer came quickly. "Good, but be careful. Those who dig too deep end up finding corpses." She laughed to herself. "That's exactly what I want."
As the evidence began to pile up, Lara realized it wasn't just a matter of revenge, it was justice. Eduardo hadn't just abandoned her on a sidewalk, he'd made her invisible for years. Now, she would make him see her true colors. That night, the rain fell heavily. The sound of drops against the window mingled with the steady tapping of his fingers. The dark room was lit only by the computer screen and the cold glow of revenge. Marcos had become her digital shadow. They talked every day, exchanging codes, hypotheses, and strategies. He taught Lara how to mask IP addresses and create secure routes. The plan ceased to be a teenage prank and became a meticulous operation. Every step was thought out, every risk calculated. "The best revenge is the one that seems like a coincidence," he wrote in one of their conversations. She jotted the phrase down in her notebook, highlighted in red. Lara began constructing a parallel narrative. While pretending to study for math Olympiads, she spent all night assembling the dossier. She created folders with innocuous titles, exercises, photos, old tests, and within them she hid financial documents, screenshots, and audio recordings of discussions between Eduardo and Tatiana. One day, during a family party, she overheard her brother talking to their father about a dirty but lucrative business. He laughed confidently, unaware that Lara was recording the whole thing with the cell phone in her pocket. With each laugh, she felt the satisfaction grow, the feeling of finally being in control. Tatiana, on the other hand, was growing suspicious. She kept a discreet eye on Lara, entering the room without knocking, asking questions disguised as curiosity. But Lara was always precise in her answers, with the calm tone of someone with nothing to hide. When Tatiana left the room one night, Lara watched her in the mirror and was certain the battleground had been drawn. Days later, Marcos presented a risky idea. What if you sent the evidence to someone he trusts, someone who would doubt his own innocence? Lara thought. "My parents," she replied. He typed just one word. Perfect. She began assembling the main document, the Valine dossier, with all the fraud, suspicious movements, and audio recordings between Eduardo and Tatiana. At school, teachers noticed something different. "You're more focused, Lara," one teacher would say. She just smiled, not revealing that she was applying the logic of strategic games from class directly to real life. Revenge became an equation, and she had already mastered all the variables. One night, Mark wrote, "Once you send this, there is no going back." Lara replied, "Whoever abandoned me has already crossed that line for me." The cursor blinked on the screen for long seconds before the answer appeared. Then let the game begin. She clicked save. The file flashed on the monitor, sealing everyone's fate. The game had officially begun. The following weeks were spent in silent surveillance. Lara was no longer just an observer. She was an infiltrator in her brother's empire. Using remote access, she saw spreadsheets of financial transactions, lists of fictitious suppliers, and compromising conversations with local politicians. Eduardo's business, once a symbol of success, now revealed itself to be a web of lies. Each new document seemed more rotten than the last. Lara no longer felt anger, only an almost clinical focus. Emotion had given way to strategy. The glow of the monitor reflected in her eyes as numbers and names paraded across the screen. "You built this on sand, Eduardo," she murmured to herself as if he could hear her. In one of the folders, she found something that made her heart race. Contracts signed in her parents' names, without their knowledge. Eduardo had used his own parents' information to open shell companies. The betrayal wasn't just moral, it was legal. Lara closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This would be the final blow. Tatiana, increasingly nervous, began to show signs of urges. Lara realized she was in a constant state of alert, checking her cell phones and whispering on the phone. During dinner, she heard Tatiana whisper, "If she finds out, we're dead." Lara kept her gaze down, hiding her smile. She already knew. One morning, while analyzing encrypted messages, Lara heard footsteps approaching. Her heart raced. She closed her laptop and pretended to sleep. Tatiana opened the door without knocking and stood there for a few seconds, watching. When she left, Lara waited 2 minutes, got up, and locked the door. The game now had a new board, inside the house. The next day, Marcos sent a message. "Be careful. Tatiana is trying to track suspicious IP addresses. She's not stupid." Lara replied, "She doesn't have to be stupid. She just has to be slow." Marcos laughed from the other side of the screen. "You're getting dangerous." With his help, Lara began creating an encrypted backup of all the evidence stored on an external server. "Never play everything on the same board," Marcos had said. It was the kind of advice she took to heart. Eduardo and Tatiana's relationship was crumbling. Daily arguments echoed through the house. Lara recorded everything on her cell phone. Her brother's voice, once confident and authoritative, now sounded strained and out of control. He was beginning to sense something was wrong, but he still didn't know where to look.
One cold night, Lara wrote in her notebook, "It's not revenge, it's balance." But as he closed the book, a shiver ran down his spine. Something told him that equilibrium would soon turn to chaos. Lara already dominated the field, but her dominance took its toll. Each move left her more isolated, further from any true affection. Her school friendships dissolved amid excuses about secret projects. Her parents thought she was simply dedicating herself to her studies. No one imagined that the studious girl was actually a revenge hacker. Tatiana began to become unpredictable. One day, she appeared in Lara's room with a tight smile and a cup of tea. "You've been working too hard, dear," she said, leaving the tea on the table. Lara thanked her, but didn't drink. The innocent gesture held symbolic venom, trust tested, not given. At the office, Eduardo's paranoia escalated. He installed cameras throughout the house, including in the hallway leading to the bedrooms. Lara noticed and discreetly placed black tape over the lens in her bedroom. Marcos helped her develop a blocking system that automatically erased any nighttime recordings. Danger loomed, but she always seemed one step ahead. The nightmares began. In the dream, she was back on that road, watching the car drive away. But this time, she was behind the wheel. Eduardo and Tatiana screamed from the back seat, begging for forgiveness. She woke up sweating, her heart racing, unsure whether to feel guilt or pleasure. One night, Mark wrote, "You're ready to send them into the abyss, but are you ready for what comes next?" Lara replied, Then it's silence." He typed slowly, "Silence also takes its toll." Tatiana finally tried to act. She called Lara over to talk and with a false smile asked if she'd seen anything strange on the computers at home. Lara replied with eerie calm, "It depends. Strange to whom?" Tatiana froze for a second,
but kept smiling. She knew she'd lost control. The same day, Eduardo received a notice of investigation from the Federal Revenue Service. Tensions flared. Shouts echoed. Doors slammed. And Lara watched from afar, like a player watching the pieces move by themselves. At night, he wrote in his notebook, "They think silence is fear. It's strategy." And next to it, he drew a straight line that ended in a circle, the symbol he used to mark checkmate.
The nights grew longer, and the days quieter. Lara slept little. Her pale face reflected the wear and tear of someone living on constant alert. Even so, no one suspected. To her parents, she was just a model student. To herself, she was a soldier at war with ghosts. The room now felt like a cell and a barracks at the same time. In his encrypted diary, he wrote memories as if recording coordinates. Each page was an attempt to keep from going mad. It wasn't just the abandonment that hurt. It was the realization that if I disappeared, no one would really look for me. The emptiness echoed between the cold lines of code. The recordings of Eduardo and Tatiane's fights became more intense. In one of them, she heard Tatiane say, "If she opens her mouth, I'll finish her off." Lara paused the audio, looked at her reflection on the screen, and smiled, not in fear, but in anticipation. The game was about to change hands. At school, she began to excel like never before. She won medals, accolades, and even an offer for an exchange program. But each achievement seemed meaningless. It was as if everything were part of a simulation, and the true reality lay in the digital shadows she herself created. Marcos, noticing the change in tone of her messages, wrote, "Lara, be careful not to become what you hate." She replied, "If I become, it's because that's what the world needs me to be." Marcos insisted, "That's what everyone says before they get lost." Lara closed her laptop, irritated. She didn't want lectures, she wanted results. She went up to her brother's office and with the coolness of someone walking on minefields, discreetly swapped the hard drive on one of the computers for a copy she had prepared herself. This would guarantee permanent proof. Returning to her room, she opened her notebook and drew a new symbol, 2 interlocking circles, one representing her and the other Eduardo. She wrote below, "If he falls, I fall with him, but I fall by choice." The sound of rain hitting the window seemed distant. For a moment, Lara missed her old self, the girl who loved puzzles, not conspiracies. But the thought quickly faded. The game was underway, and there was no stopping it now. Tatiane knew. Lara could sense it in every look, every disguised gesture, every carefully chosen word. The woman had stopped feigning affection and now studied the girl like a stalking predator. The house had become a minefield. Even her smiles had the sound of a trap.
One morning, Tatiane appeared in the room with an envelope. "I found this in your trash," she said calmly. Inside was a piece of paper with logins and passwords written down, a minor mistake forgotten on a careless night. Lara maintained her composure. "They're puzzles for a game," she lied. Tatiane tilted her head, smiling. "You always liked games, didn't you?" In the following days, Lara began to feel watched. The atmosphere at home was suffocating. Every noise seemed suspicious. When checking the router settings, she found attempts at external access. "She's trying to track me," she texted Marcos. The response came immediately. "Then make her believe she did it." Following the advice, Lara prepared a fake file with doctored data and purposefully left it in an accessible folder. A few hours later, she noticed the movement. Tatiane had opened the file. Inside, simple text flashed on the screen. "Tatiane, be careful what you wish to find out. You might not like the answer." The woman lost control. She confronted Eduardo, screaming that someone was spying on her.
He, furious, accused employees and threatened to fire half the company. Lara watched from afar, with the same cold gaze of a strategist watching the enemy destroy itself. But not everything went as planned. Marcos disappeared. No response to messages, no sign of a login. Lara began to feel empty. For the first time, the feeling of being alone wasn't power, it was fear. And this fear, new and corrosive, began to shake her confidence. Tatiana, increasingly unstable, tried to turn the tables. She told her parents that Lara was obsessed with revenge and needed psychological help. Her mother, worried, tried to talk to her. "Daughter, what's happening to you?" Lara simply replied, "I'm finally learning from the best teacher, your son." That night, Lara returned to her computer and finalized the dossier. The file was heavy, complete, and indisputable. At the top, she wrote, "Subject, business fraud, Eduardo Valin and Tatiana Costa." And in the sender line, just anonymous. Clicked on send. For a second, the world seemed to stop. Email has traversed the digital space, and with it, everyone's destiny. The click of send was barely audible, but it echoed within her like the sound of a sentence being sealed. Lara stared at the screen for a few seconds, motionless, until the email disappeared into the sending bar. Then she took a deep breath. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper, a mixture of power and guilt. What had begun as revenge was now irreversible. The first responses arrived in less than 48 hours. Official notifications, automated emails, contacts from authorities. The dossier had reached the Federal Revenue Service and, mysteriously, also Lara's parents. She knew this when she heard her mother crying in the office and her father furiously shouting Eduardo's name. The war had left her mind and invaded her home.
Eduardo arrived home distraught, his face pale and his cell phone pressed to his ear. "This is a mistake! A damn mistake!" he screamed. Tatiana followed him, crying hysterically, trying to convince him they could still fix everything. Lara watched from the stairs, cool, almost serene. The chaos had a beauty all its own, that of someone watching justice unfold in real time. For 3 days, the house became a battlefield. Eduardo screamed, Tatiana locked herself in her room, and the parents barely ate. The family lawyer appeared constantly, his expression worsening with each visit. "There's too much evidence," he said. This was an internal complaint. Eduardo insisted they had been betrayed by an employee. At dawn on the 4th day, Marcos returned. A simple message flashed on the screen. "I saw the news. You really did." Lara replied, "I warned you. They're looking for the sender. Did you delete everything?" "Everything I could, but Tatiana might have suspected." "Then get ready. The board will burn." Lara closed her laptop and went to the window. The sky was clear and starry. Ironic, she thought, since chaos was raining down inside the house. She could hear her parents quietly discussing what they would do with their criminal son. For the first time, she felt sorry, not for him, but for them, those who never saw the truth until it was too late. The next day, the TV news broadcast the name Eduardo Valin, a businessman accused of fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. Tatiana wept silently, while Eduardo smashed objects in the hallway. Lara calmly walked down the stairs, past them, and headed to school as if nothing had happened. In his backpack, he carried only a notebook. On the cover, a single sentence was written: "The lesson has been taught." The news spread like wildfire.
Newspapers, websites, and even social media were flooded with Eduardo Valin's name. Young businessman involved in a multi-million-dollar corruption scheme. Old photos of him smiling at events now seemed like caricatures of arrogance. Lara watched it all with the calm of someone observing a storm she herself predicted. The parents were devastated. The mother spent her days in silence, and the father alternated between anger and denial. "My son is not a criminal," he repeated, even in the face of proof. Lara tried to empathize, but inside she felt something more complex. Not joy, not regret, but a strange kind of bitter peace.
Tatiana, on the other hand, despaired. She called lawyers, cried to friends, and finally revealed the worst. She, too, was involved. She had used Eduardo's name in false contracts, believing they would never be discovered. The love between them crumbled, along with the empire. The fights became daily, vicious, full of accusations and secrets thrown to the wind. In one of these arguments, Eduardo yelled, "You dragged me into this!" And Tatiana replied, "No, you were the one who started it. I just didn't count on your sister's genius." Lara, from the hallway, heard everything. The words, "your sister's genius," sounded like a confession and a warning at the same time. Tatiana knew. Marco sent one last message that week. "If she finds out, she will try to destroy you." Lara replied, "She already tried. Now it's my turn to observe." Days later, federal auditors arrived at the house to seize documents. Eduardo tried to maintain his composure, but his panic was evident. The sound of printers turning off, the creak of drawers being opened, the click of imaginary handcuffs, it was all music to Lara's ears. That night, alone in her room, she looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Her eyes were different, colder, deeper. "I won," she whispered. But the echo of her own voice sounded hollow. Winning, she realized, doesn't always mean being at peace. The next day, the family gathered for what would be their last dinner together. The silence was absolute. Until Eduardo looked up and said, "Whoever did this will pay." Lara kept her gaze steady. "I hope so." He didn't notice the double meaning, but Tatiana noticed and smiled. The sound of rain hitting the glass sounded the same as that night on the road. Lara watched the dark sky, her heart racing without knowing why. Her phone vibrated on the table. An email notification. Subject, "We need to talk." Sender, Marcos_X. It had been weeks since he had disappeared. The message was short, almost cold. "They're tracking you. I can't use this channel for much longer. The IP address where the dossier was sent was triangulated. Someone at the IRS sold the information." Lara froze. The air grew heavy, her hands sweating. Everything she had done to remain invisible was about to crumble. He replied with trembling fingers, "Do they know it was me?" "Not yet. But Tatiana is paying someone to find out, and that someone is good, very good." Dread mixed with anger. "So she wants war. There will be war."
Marcos asked her to delete all copies, but Lara hesitated. "Without proof, I'm vulnerable," he argued. He insisted, "With proof, you're dead." The silence between messages said more than any words. It was the first time Lara felt real fear, not of being caught, but of losing control. That night, the nightmare returned. She was on the road again, but this time it was Marcos who was abandoning her. The car slowly pulled away, and she screamed, but no sound came out. When she woke, her heart felt like a bomb about to explode. Tatiana watched her more and more.
The deep circles under her eyes, the forced smiles, the practiced calm. Lara knew she was under suspicion. "You're acting strange, dear," the woman said one morning. "You seem tired of pretending." Lara smiled. "And you seem tired of being caught." Hours later, an anonymous message arrived in Lara's email. "Do you think you can play with fire without getting burned?" No identified sender, no trace, just the chilling feeling that the game was far from over. Marcos disappeared again. And for the first time, Lara wondered if he had ever really existed. The following weeks were a slow-motion collapse. Eduardo, now officially under investigation, had all his assets frozen. The company closed its doors, employees dispersed, and the press camped out in front of the family home. The name Valen became synonymous with shame. Tatiana, penniless and without support, began to publicly blame Eduardo. She gave interviews, leaked documents, and tried to save her own skin. "I was just following orders," she said. Eduardo responded with hatred and despair. "You destroyed my life!" Lara watched their mutual destruction with a mixture of fascination and guilt. It was like watching a house of cards collapse, beautiful and tragic at the same time. The devastated parents lost the sparkle in their eyes. The mother wept silently in her room, and the father barely spoke. Neither of them imagined that the silent daughter beside them had been the architect of it all. And this, paradoxically, was what hurt Lara most, the loneliness of victory. One afternoon, the house phone rang. Lara answered. "Who is speaking?" A male voice replied. "Do you think you can hide the truth, Lara?" She froze. "Who is it?" The call dropped. That night, panic began to creep in. Every notification, every sound on the street felt like a threat. Lara deleted all of Marcos's messages, destroyed the external hard drive, and burned her notebook notes. She watched the flames swallow her words, and with them, part of her sanity.
Eduardo was placed under preventative arrest 2 weeks later. Cameras captured the moment he left his home handcuffed, his face weary, his gaze vacant. Tatiana, by his side, shouted insults and promised revenge. Lara watched the scene on TV, and for the first time, she cried. It wasn't joy. It was exhaustion. Everything she had planned had worked, and yet she felt she had lost more than her brother. She had lost herself. That night, he wrote the last line in the notebook before throwing it into the fire. The problem with being the smartest player is that in the end, you play alone. Time seemed to have stopped since Eduardo's arrest. The house was silent, as if the air had been completely emptied. The curtains remained closed, and the living room clock, stuck at 3 in the morning, marked the moment the parents lost their son and Lara lost her innocence. She walked the halls with light steps, observing the walls that once held laughter and now echoed with shame. Her father's gaze was distant, her mother's broken. Neither of them spoke of Eduardo, as if the name had become a curse. Lara wanted to tell the truth, to shout that all of this was her doing, but something held her back. It was fear, or maybe pride. One sleepless night, he opened his laptop and began writing a confession. He typed everything: the abandonment, the plan, Marcus, the dossier. Each word seemed to lift a weight, but at the same time dig a deeper hole in his chest. When he finished, he stared at the screen, the cursor blinking as if asking, "Do you have the courage to send it?" The next morning, she was called to testify. The IRS wanted to interview Eduardo's family. She sat before the agents, calmly answered each question, and lied with the precision of someone trained for this. "I don't know anything about his finances. We've always been distant." The lie came out smoothly, almost naturally. She left the room and cried in the bathroom, alone. In the following days, the nightmares worsened. She saw her brother's face no longer as an enemy, but as someone lost. The sound of the car speeding away on the highway returned, but this time she was the one holding the steering wheel. She tried to wake up, but guilt was a silent scream that held her captive. A month later, the family lawyer contacted her. "Your parents want to transfer part of their assets to you. They think it's fair since Eduardo is out." Lara accepted silently. She knew her inheritance was built on ruins. As she signed the papers, she felt the symbolic weight of the pen and the cruel irony of fate. She was inheriting what she had destroyed.
Back in his room, he opened the confession on his computer and read it for the last time, deleted the file. Then he emptied the trash, and finally he turned off the notebook. In the mirror, he saw his own reflection, tired eyes, impassive face. "You win," he murmured, but the echo replied, "and lost everything." Months passed. The Vallon case had become a forgotten headline, replaced by new scandals. Eduardo remained in prison. Tatiani had disappeared from the news, and the parents lived in seclusion, lacking the strength to start over. Lara, emancipated and legal heir, became a symbol of precocious maturity, a perfect disguise for someone carrying too many secrets. She enrolled in university to study systems design, channeling her intelligence into something constructive. She created digital security projects, programs that protected young people from online scams. When she presented her idea for an incentive fund, she explained, "My goal is to prevent others from being manipulated like I was." The audience applauded, but she knew the true meaning of the sentence lay between the lines. Despite her success, the emptiness persisted. At night, she dreamed of Marcos, of the road, of the sound of keys echoing like a heartbeat. Sometimes she woke up and felt like someone was watching her. Some nights, she swore she heard message notifications, but when she looked, the screen was dark. One day, she was invited to participate in a lecture on young people and digital ethics. The irony made her smile. She took the stage, looked at the audience, and began, "I believe that power without empathy destroys, and that absolute control is just another form of fear." No one knew how autobiographical those words were. At the end, a girl from the audience came up and said, "Your words gave me the strength to stand up to my brother. He humiliates me all the time." Lara looked her in the eyes and replied, "Then learn to win without becoming him." It was the first time she felt that maybe she could turn pain into purpose. Back home, she looked out the window at the sky. It was the same shade of blue as the morning she'd left behind years before. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "You're still playing, Eduardo," she muttered. "But now the rules are mine." Lara's life finally seemed stable. The small apartment she rented in the city was quiet, with walls covered in minimalist paintings and logic books stacked on impeccable shelves. She worked at a cybersecurity startup and lectured at schools on digital ethics. On the outside, a young prodigy. On the inside, a mind that still carried the echo of chaos. One night, after a long day of meetings, he turned on his laptop just to review reports. He opened his email inbox and froze. Among the routine messages, there was a new one, with no identified sender. The subject line, "Do you really think no one knows what happened?" The body of the email contained just one sentence, "The game never ended, M." Lara's heart raced. She scanned the screen repeatedly, trying to decipher whether it was a joke, a threat, or a reminder of the past that never died. The M could only be Marcos. But he had disappeared years ago. Or maybe he had never disappeared, just waiting for the right moment to reappear. In the following days, she tried to trace the email's origin. Nothing. The address was masked by layers of anonymity as sophisticated as the ones she herself created. And this frightened her more than any direct threat. Someone was playing by her rules. The memories came flooding back. The road, the dust, the sound of the car pulling away, the sleepless nights, the hands trembling at the keyboard, the intoxicating power of destroying unseen. For a moment, she missed that chaos, the feeling of absolute control. And then she realized the danger of it. The game never left her, it just fell asleep inside her. The next morning, Lara made a decision. She went to the police station and handed over a sealed envelope containing a copy of her confession, written months earlier and never sent. "If anything happens to me, give this to the press," she calmly told the officer. The man asked, "Are you being threatened?" She smiled. "Let's just say I'm finishing a game." Back at the apartment, he sat down at his laptop and replied to the email. "You're right. The game isn't over, but now I choose the rules." She closed the screen, took a deep breath, and looked out the window at the night sky. The stars looked the same as they had years ago when it all began, a memory both sweet and bitter at the same time, of the girl who was abandoned and of the woman who learned to transform wounds into power. On the desk lay the burned notebook, or what was left of it. Among the charred pages, a note still legible. The real lesson isn't teaching others, it's learning who you become when no one is watching. The phone vibrated again, a new anonymous message. "Next round?" Lara smiled, closed her eyes, and typed just one word: "Always." The screen went dark, and the game started again. They wanted to teach a lesson, but she was the one who wrote the punishment. If this story gave you chills, subscribe to the channel now, because here, every story shows what happens when pain turns into power.